Okay, Tom, well, if you're covering these amazing topics of, of God, God's future, God's people, um, where on earth do you touch on the real big juicy stuff we all want to hear about? Which of course is justification by faith and salvation. I mean, the rest of the stuff is good, but for us, for us diehard Protestants, that's just the gravy
Yeah.
with the meat and the potatoes. The meat and the potatoes, justification by faith.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Where's that coming?
Justification by faith is pretty close to the center of the project. Where the book comes to its climax is in part 3. Part 3 is structured God, God's people, God's future. So the people of God is in the middle. And so the way that justification works for Paul, and this is, of course, the shaping of the book depends on the argument which I make, as it were, is that the whole point of salvation for Paul is that this is what God has planned to give to the world through the people he launched when he called Abraham. Now, this is very basic for me, and it's a deeply Jewish insight. I go back to that rabbi who said in, I think, the 3rd or 4th century, that God said to himself, I will make Adam first, and if he goes wrong, I will send Abraham to sort it all out. That's a deeply Jewish insight which corresponds to the structure of Genesis, that Genesis 12 is where God says, now we're going to get the project back on track, the project that went horribly pear-shaped with Adam, that almost went multiply pear-shaped with Noah, and that then has clearly resulted in mega-human arrogance with the Tower of Babel. Now we're sorting it out, Genesis 12. So the question of salvation, of how the world gets sorted out and how humans get sorted out and forgiven and justified and put right and all that, is, in Jewish thought, part of the question of how then has God done what he said to Abraham he would do. Some people don't like looking at it like that, but I'm afraid Paul did look at it like that. So that for me, the question of justification and salvation is right at the center of the question of who are God's people, not simply who are the people of God as though all this is just a matter of a community and by the way we get saved on the side, as it were. The point of the people of God at the beginning was this dynamic idea that God calls Abraham to be the means of rescuing Adam and hence of getting the creation project back on track. But Abraham by himself can't do it, because Abraham himself is part of the problem as well as part of the solution. And when I say Abraham, I mean the Jewish people. The problem with the Jews is that, as I once heard Rabbi Lionel Blue say, Jews are just like everybody else, only more so. And the problem that we all have is also a problem that Jews have. So it isn't that Jews are miraculously preserved from human failings and folly, and no wise Jew would claim that either. Paul certainly didn't. So the problem then is, so how can God be faithful to his promises to Abraham? Because surely they've messed up like the rest of us have. And the answer is yes, but from the people of Israel, God has produced the Messiah, who is Jesus, and the Messiah is the faithful Israel in person. And his faithfulness is expressed precisely in his death, which says, yes, that whole thing needed to be put to death, but that was how the world was going to be rescued. So it all comes from Abraham focused on Jesus and to the cross, so that at the heart of the story of the people of God, you get the saving event. If you try to take the saving event, the cross, and put it within a different narrative, it doesn't mean what Paul says it means. That's what's happened in so much Christian theology down the years. So that the heart of my chapter on the people of God, rethought around Jesus and the Spirit, is the story of the cross, and justification which happens as a result of that, and salvation which happens as a result of that. But because it's a dynamic thing, because it's going somewhere, because this is the purpose of God, it isn't simply about, so phew, we get saved so we can go and be with God forever, we are reconciled to God and that's it. Part of the point of this for Paul is when human beings get sorted out, get forgiven, get saved, get healed, get sanctified, get justified, then they get glorified, and glorified is not a coded way of saying going to heaven. It's not an odd way of saying we're going to end up shining like light bulbs, as though that was kind of a good thing to be. Well, we may, who knows, we may not. That's not the point. For Paul, glory is what the Psalm 8 says when it says that humans are crowned with glory and honour and are given dominion over the works of God's hands. God at the beginning made human beings to be his royal priesthood, looking after his world with wise, gentle stewardship and summing up the praises of creation and presenting them before God. That's what the glory of humans is. At the end of Romans 8, that's what it's all about. Humans are restored so that through them the world may be transformed. The extraordinary news, which most Christians have hardly begun to glimpse, is that that already began with the resurrection and the gift of the Spirit. And if that isn't an agenda for the church in tomorrow's world, I don't know what is. So at the heart of the book, yes, the cross, justification, and then long discussion of the law and how that works. These are the central topics of traditional Pauline theology. I have reframed those topics within Paul's revision of all Jewish theology in order to show that this is not a static soteriology, but one which then energizes the mission of the church then and now.